And we're live. Phil Tarrant, Tom Panos, Real Estate Exposed. Two remote people working, embracing work-life balance, change, post-COVID life, having an attitude of gratitude. This is the way we like to work at Tom. And I see you got the memo. You've worn your black puffer jacket. The winter chill's still there, but spring is certainly on its way. And whether or not that's in the housing market, who knows? How's the market, Tom?
Well, I think it's close to bottomed, if not bottomed, in a number of markets, Phil, particularly Sydney and Melbourne. I'm having conversations with a lot of real estate agents. I don't think there's a person in Australia that has the amount of conversations I have with agents. And the reason I know it is I had a journalist said to me today, I've been really busy. I've spoken to 3 agents about what they're seeing in the market. And I said to him, mate, I've spoken to 3 agents in the last 15 minutes. And then he said to me, how many agents do you actually speak to? You know, like, what's the rate of you talking to agents? Phil, it's probably about 30 a day. It's 150 a week. And I tell you what, you get a lot of information. And Sydney, Melbourne, I think we're close to the bottom. The clearance rate's gone up. Anyone that's been monitoring the clearance rate, it was rock bottom July, August. Now we're going to have a lot of the cynics, the ones that are talking about, the crash coming, the big recession, are going to turn around and say to me, but hang on a second, watch what's going to happen. You've still got rate rises going on. They're going to say, can't you see what's going on in the USA? They're going to say to you about inflation is out of control. Well, all I've got to say to you is that if you've been following the market very closely, people have already dropped 15%, some properties 20%. The correction has in fact taken place. And now what I'm seeing, Phil, is that there's a bunch of buyers that are thinking to themselves, you know what? We might only have a few months' time before there are people back in there again. This is good buying. So I'm seeing it. There are other parts of Australia. Adelaide's only just begun its price corrections. Brisbane happened a little bit after Sydney and Melbourne. But the surprising thing is, and I'm here in Byron Bay, and I talk to agents both in coastal and country areas, there's no question about it, Phil. And this was validated by a report in the Fin Review that measures the behaviour of employees. 30% of the workforce is still a Zoom worker and unlikely to return back to a level of pattern of working prior to COVID.
Yeah, and I think that's good news and that's good for regional Australia. And we've been chatting about this right through the pandemic, Tom, and we've given some sense to it. Regional Australia means many different things. My sort of thesis of all of this is that you can be a part-time Zoom worker, part-time office worker, as long as you're within striking distance of where your office is. And if your office is or you work inside of professional services or banking or finance or these sort of big sort of 2,000 postcode, 3,000 postcode type offices, you need to be in regional Australia within striking distance, easy commute within an hour and a half of those areas. And they're the markets, Tom, regionally, who will continue to drive forward, I think, post-pandemic. And if you look at some of those suburbs up and down the east coast of Australia, for example, whether it's Brizzy, Sydney or Melbourne, you're not seeing those similar price drops that you're seeing in those capital cities, Tom. They're holding their price points well, irrespective of downward pressure on prices elsewhere and rising interest rates. So, you're speaking to 150 agents every single week. I'd say you're probably one of the most informed people in terms of real estate, as in the ground truth, the immediacy of it. You don't sit around and wait for data, Tom. You're getting it firsthand pretty much every minute of every day. Whether it's bottomed out or not, it's not my position to call it. You'd probably be a lot closer to it than me. But I guess the question is, Tom, if it has bottomed, how long will it stay bottom? How long will it just be this like lackluster sideways sort of movement for a period of time before prices start going up again? That's the big billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It's a $1 billion question, and it affects the behavior of so many people that want to buy real estate at the moment, Phil, because the number one fear that buyers have is not fear of missing out like previously, but fear of overpaying. They're paranoid that they've worked really hard to save a deposit and they're going to buy a property for 900 and it's going to be worth 800. That's the fear that people have. However, I would actually suggest to buyers, the other fear that you should have is, will you miss that window opportunity to buy what you want at a really good figure? And it wasn't in March. It wasn't in May. It may be right now, from what I can see. You might have another 6 months, maybe. But there's talk going out that, the Reserve Bank doesn't want Australians to feel poor at Christmas, and that their narrative may change. They don't want to have Australians sitting in their house traumatized with fear, not spending money over Christmas. So Phil, there is a possibility that we've got October, November pricing rate increases. And it's such an emotive topic, because I'm looking at the comments here. It's nowhere near the bottom. Ask the people out west paying 1.5 million for a house on a 300 square meter block. The world economy is screwed, right? It creates a lot of emotion with people, and there's a big view. I think there's a large percentage of people out there that do want the market to crash.
Yeah, I think there is, and there'll be people looking to capitalize on it. But it is very much in between people's ears. A friend of mine took a property auction on Saturday in Sydney. The area would be, I imagine, around Rhodes. I don't know how familiar you are with that area. I think it was a 3-bedroom apartment. He thought, he sort of, I can't remember exactly what his reserve was going to be, $2 million or somewhere or other, I think, by memory. And he said anything over that is that's good. Anyway, I think it went $200,000 or $300,000 over the reserve, and it was a suburb record. And he's like going, how good is it? He's gone, I thought I'd get nowhere near the valuation that I got on the same property a year or so ago. So this is still happening. These stories are still happening. It's the media who continue to paint, a picture of doom and gloom. And that's largely what the media does, Tom. And I guess this podcast is part of the inverted commas catch-all of the media. So we're quite considered in our conversations. I think some areas probably still have somewhere to go. I think there was an example there around a $1.5 million place on 300 square meters out west. Yeah, right now, that's a fair chunk of change for an asset like that. But it's horses for courses, It is absolutely horses for courses.
Phil, I'm just having a look, to just revalidate what I've said and what we're talking about, the strength of the market not being down in the dumps. I mean, listen, down in the dumps market is when there are no buyers, no one's looking to buy, no one's coming to opens, there are no deals being done. I'm looking at here Saturday, 24th of September, 82 to 84, Coal Parade, Coal Bay. A block of land with a terrible house on it that was run down land value, sold for 4.6 million. Went higher for a comparable property a year ago. 237 William Street, Kingsgrove. This is an area I walked pretty much every day as I went to Kingsgrove North High. And this property sold 150 grand more than the reserve price on a busy road, sold for 1.430. Vendor, one of my favorite vendors, did a video. It's actually up on my social media. She was just on cloud 9 because she's hit the jackpot. But the list goes on. 13 Baronia Avenue, Burwood, sold for 2.8 million. Owner expectation was around 2,650. And the list goes on. Where's this one here? So then there was a property in Lakemba. The owners wanted 1 million, 1,050,000. No one showed up, right? So, Phil, I think the next month or two, if you're a buyer, there's a great comment that's come in here. I think I love it from an agent. I'll read it. I'll bring it up. Oh, wow. A lot of comments here today. Buy now. It's already dropped. Sell now. You've made your 25. That's a good comment there, right? Everyone's done okay in real estate in the last couple of years. But I'm having a look here. Some of the other comments, Phil. Fixed home loans expire in the next 24 months. Pressure now. Okay. There's an element of truth to that. Lisa Novak. Prestige is still doing very well. Lisa Novak, 150 buyers through my open on Manly on Saturday. Tony comes in, makes me laugh. All the so-called experts predicting a housing market crash. Take note of what BOE did last night. I know what BOE is. Do you know, Phil?
Bank of England.
Bank of England stepped in and started a bond buying exercise to push interest rates down. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Hey, Kingsgrove North kid, I found a fellow student. Williams Street, all one. Above reserve. Yeah, you were watching it, Gus. That's why you're commenting. But Phil, that's the state of affair. But I mean, Phil, there's another issue that I'd love to talk to you about. Anyway, what's your take on it? Before we move off this subject, I want to hear your take on it.
Take on what? The property market?
Yeah. What are you expecting bumpier roads over the next few months?
It's got to sound like a journalist answering this question, Tom, so I apologise in advance. But I think people obsess too much about property prices, like it's the stock market. Which there's a lot of bloodbath for the stock market right now, and the issue with the stock market is that you can price your asset every single day, and it's really easy to do so. You can jump onto whatever your online trading account is. It'll tell you how much money you've made or lost that day and how much money you've made or lost since you purchased that asset. And it changes, it fluctuates by the second, by the minute, by the hour, by the day. And it's very emotive. And I've learned a long time ago to stop looking at my share portfolio, largely because I'm always disappointed and always ask myself, why don't I just put that money in property, a year and a half ago and 2 years ago and got 30% uplift on it rather than where my portfolio sits right now. So the good thing about property as an asset class is that it's really hard and also unnecessary to reprice it every single day unless you're transacting it, whether you're buying or selling. So there's this obsession about talking about the property market as though it's the stock market. And we do it on this podcast and this live stream, Tom, Real Estate Exposed, where we go, oh, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. It's a grand old Duke of York, right? Like, does it really matter that much? If you look at the numbers, there hasn't been a period of time since records have been kept in Australia where there's been a 5-year period where prices are lower than what they were 5 years prior. The inherent nature of property is that it goes up in value. It goes up in value over time. It might fluctuate up or down, but it's largely irrelevant. So my position is I get a bit fatigued about talking about whether the market's up today or down today, because so what? Does it really matter that much? If you can afford to hold your property, if you're an owner-occupier, you can afford to hold your property and you enjoy living in your property and it shows great utility for you and your family, as in it's a place to live. Yeah, it's a happy home. It gives you shelter. It gives you everything you want around it. Does it really matter if it's gone up 100 grand or down 100 grand? It's largely irrelevant. The most likely person to cash in on that is when you're 6 feet under and your kids choose to sell it off or turn it into something else, right? So it doesn't really matter. Property investors are a little bit more connected to it, but people making investment decisions on whether or not property is going to be more expensive or less expensive in 5-6 months' time probably shouldn't be investing in property. So that's my sort of overall view towards it all. It's Australia's favourite pastime is talking about property and property prices and property values, but it's a long-term investment. So I don't obsess myself with it. I try not to look at what my portfolio is worth at any given time because it doesn't really change things. And most people think I'm probably seeing the world the wrong way, but that's the way I see it, mate. I get a bit fatigued from it. I probably shouldn't be in real estate.
No, well, Phil, I think you've summed up the science of a successful property mind, and that is you don't buy based on the market, you buy based on your life. If your cash flow says, hey, now's the time that you can buy, you buy. I think what you said really sums up a lot of property investors. It's irrelevant to those. Where it has an impact, the market, is if you've got the choice, if you've got to sell an asset, right? If you're let's say you're a mum and dad, and you've been your parents have passed away, and you've got an asset there. Um, 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 if you'd sold it, 6 months ago, you probably would have got $1 million more if it was a $10 million property, or five, or let's just say 10, 15%, 20%. But to the average person, unless of course you are that buyer who, and it does make a difference if you are buying your first home, Phil, right? And whether you bought it in March this year for 800, or whether you're buying it now for 700, obviously it does have some sort of impact
That
to
matters.
you.
That actually matters.
Yeah, it matters. But
Very tangible.
to the average person that's involved in property investment, there is no recommended retail price in real estate. That's the issue here. There is no recommended retail price in real estate. So it really is an insignificant number. But as you said, it's totally different to the way people work with equities, because there is a recommended retail price at a specific moment, and it's the same across the whole world. That's that asset at that moment, like sugar, like any mineral, right? It's a commodity that's got this distinct value at one point of time, and it'd be a stressful way to live. But Phil, stressful way to live.
It's hugely stressful. That's the reason why I don't concern myself too much with it. But it's a real 80-20 type of scenario. And what I mean by that in terms of property is that 20% of what's happening in property, which is the fringes of property, dominates 80% of the commentary and coverage around property. So it's the little bits on the edges where, there's a comment there around this interest rate cliff in 48 months. So this is essentially people's fixed rates coming off and all this sort of stuff, right? It's the people who are buying and selling and transacting. It's the fringes of real estate dominates what everyone talks about. They don't want to talk about the mum and dad with a house in the burbs. They don't want to talk about the property investor who's just going about doing their business, because it's boring. And most of those people are probably in pretty good position. It's only when you hear horror stories that they make the headlines. And I know you write regularly for news.com and the news stable of publications, Tom, and newspapers. And that's the sort of stuff they want to write about, right? Because it creates headlines and it makes people pick up papers and go, oh, this is a bit sensationalist. Yeah, property isn't sensationalist. Property is boring. You do property right, it's very, very boring. It shouldn't be sensationalist. It should just be largely common and garden. And that doesn't sell papers and doesn't sort of create coverage. It doesn't get clicks on pages. So this is my logic around this 80-20. 20% of what's happening in property creates 80% of the commentary and coverage around it. And you've got to be very careful about how you choose to absorb that. Now, Tom, what has made a lot of coverage over the last week or so is this Optus hack. And a lot of our listeners, mortgage brokers, real estate agents, property managers might think, oh, well, yeah, maybe someone's got my data who, if they're an Optus customer, yes, that is a point of concern. And there's a lot of information around it from, Scam Watch and different government regulatory bodies about what you should be doing as a consumer. But what a lot of real estate professionals or property professionals or mortgage professionals may not be thinking about is that this same thing can happen to them. And if you have a look at or consider the type of data that mortgage brokers and real estate agents and property managers will keep of their clients, it's as valuable as that data that's been stolen from Optus. So if you're a principal or a business owner in real estate, Tom, I'd be really having a think right now around your compliance and your cyber resilience, because if it can happen to Optus, it can happen to you. And do you want to be on the front page of the Moree Times or the Mossman Daily as a real estate agent with 3, 4, 5,000 database getting hacked and stolen by some nefarious actor? You want to have a look at your systems and processes right now. Real estate professionals would be my recommendation.
Yeah, so I had a client on the weekend that hit me up and said, listen, we've been hit, cyber fraud. I need an insurance. So this is a client I actually auctioned on the weekend for. And he wouldn't give me the detail. He says, listen, I prefer not. It's devastated us. But he goes, I need to find an insurance company now going forward that's going to cover us for cyber, which is, I never really thought about, insurance coverage on cyber. So I gave him the name of a company that I use that's a broker. But, Phil, there are two companies I do work for, Secure Exchange, which you were on that boat cruise with, and Realtair. And when I speak to them, cyber is such a big thing that they talk about. But I find as soon as I talk about it to the real estate agents, it's a bit like talking about life insurance, because it's not a problem till it is, if you know what I mean, right? But what's happening is all of a sudden it's a problem more often. That's the issue now, Yeah. Feel like I'm not quite sure what details were leaked in the Optus one, but they're talking about, Medicare details and all the identification details that people have. Real estate, man, that's got to be up there on the top of the scale in terms of data. Real estate agents are holding the data that real estate agents hold is incredible, including the bank account details of people.
Oh yeah, and if you are interested in this, if you look at where a lot of cyber fraud is penetrates which industry sector, real estate is right at the top of the list, and you see it time and time again where someone who is buying a house, you'll have some sort of cyber actor, fraudulent actor, getting in there and impersonating the real estate agent, saying, "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, can you send your $200,000 deposit into this particular bank account? Nice doing business with you." And people are losing deposit money left, right, and center. It happens, and it happens a lot inside of real estate. And again, to all principals and business owners out there, you need to ensure your staff are well trained on how to be more cyber resilient and how to spot these type of things, because it does happen. And it can devastate families when they're losing deposit money like that. It happens also in property management with fraudulent behavior using cyber crime. And, with the Optus hack, it's just a sage reminder for everyone. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when there'll be some type of cyber crime that will impact you as in your organization. So I spent earlier this year traveling around Australia, Tom, talking to mortgage brokers around this with Dr. Marcus Thompson, who is the head of information warfare for Australia, so Australia's top cyber guy within government, talking to mortgage brokers around just how open they are to cyber fraud. And if you think about the sort of information a mortgage broker has on you, Tom, you use a mortgage broker, probably know more about your financial health and your financial situation than your family does from your wife. They've got everything. And that stuff can and often is lost through nefarious cyber activities. So use this as a way to at least having the conversations inside of your organization, and making sure that it's not something which you'll get around to. That's something that is an absolute priority. You'll sleep a lot better at night, I'll tell you that for free.
So a lot of officers that I know have been had incidents in regards to transfer of monies. The 10% deposits are big ones, Phil, because it's big chunky chunks of money, and a lot of the officers are now saying to me they've got a third step in the process, and that is before they do the transfer, they're picking up the phone and they're having a conversation and they're saying, "Hey, I'm letting you know I've got this message. I'm about to transfer this money to this account. Can I please verify this?" So they're actually having a conversation, whether it's a lawyer or whoever the entity is. Yeah, I'm just having a read here. What's Ben saying? If you are telling us that agents are not very serious about cyber, then why should I hand over my information when doing an inspection? Well, there you
Fair
go.
point.
And that's Ben. Obviously, Ben's not a real estate agent; he's a consumer.
But I think Ben
and
makes a really good point, because if you're an Optus customer, at a point in time, you would have clicked the box saying, "I agree to all the terms and conditions," and those terms and conditions would be, we're going to collect all this information from you. We're going to be storing this information. We're going to be using this information. Most people just click the box and press accept and don't even think about it. To Ben's point there, when you rock up at an open home and you're an agent, you say to, Mr. or Mrs. Panos, "Oh, thanks for coming along to the open home today. Can I just grab your details before I let you into the property so I can call you up later on and try and sell you this thing?" Australian consumers are going to be a lot more aware of and considerate towards passing over their financial information or any of their personal information, because if it happens to Optus, it can happen to most. And there's a good chance that new laws and legislation with pretty hefty fines will start getting put in place around this stuff as well. So you have a duty of care right now around it, protecting your client's information. If you're a company director or a principal, and you're in charge of the shop, according to ASIC, you also have director's duties around this as well. It's pretty considerable stuff. Don't want to be a doom and gloom merchant and concern people too much. But there's some really, really simple things that everyone can do, whether they're agents or brokers or they're running a brokerage or a real estate agency. Tom, there's a thing called the Essential 8. So if you just Google Essential 8 Cyber, there'll be 8 steps, and this is out of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. These are the 8 steps that you should be doing as an absolute basis for approaching cyber resilience inside of your organization, you personally. And if you implement those 8 things, you're probably within the top 20% of cyber resilient companies in Australia. It's pretty simple stuff. Essential 8. You should be talking about it. Essential 8. Just Google Essential 8 Cyber, and there'll be 8 things. And one of those 8 things is multi-factor authentication. So when you log into something and they'll send you a text message saying, put this in to make sure it's you, that's one of the Essential 8. Pretty simple stuff. Updating your phone and updating your systems. When a thing pops up on your computer saying, "Oh, there's a new software update from Microsoft," update your computer. When something comes through your Apple phone saying there's a new iOS because we've done some new updates, update straight away. This is called patching, where you just always having the most latest installation of software to remove those vulnerabilities that exist in systems. That's another one of the Essential 8. Pretty simple stuff, Tom.
Well, that's a very useful resource that you've shared with us, Phil. It sounds like that's probably the first point for someone to actually go to if all of a sudden it's mattered to them, and it should matter to you.
And just ask questions. You don't have to be a cyber expert. There's going to be a point in time when you are going to need to call someone in, some sort of technical person. Most people's organizations aren't big enough to warrant having they're called CISOs, a Chief Information Security Officer. But there is a lot of really good sort of third-party vendors that should be able to help most SMEs around this sort of stuff. And by doing stuff, and the logic with cyber, and this is something I learned as I roadshow these discussions over earlier this year, is that it's the slow. It's essentially the slow. It's the slower swimmer who gets eaten, right? Just don't be the slower swimmer. So if you're doing more than someone else, probably they'll be a greater target towards cybercrime than what you do, because most cyber actors, most criminal actors, just want to try and find the weakest link, and they'll capitalize on that. If you're too hard, they'll just move around you and go to the next person. So just don't be the slowest swimmer.
Yeah. All right, Phil Tarrant, I want to thank you so much again. We got a big weekend of AFL finished last week. We got NRL this weekend. We got a long weekend.
We do, mate. The Mighty Eels. This is my team from my childhood. I'll be supporting the Mighty Eels. I think 1987 was the last time we won a grand final.
Yeah, I think you're right. 86 or 87. I
Yeah.
think you're right. Go Paris, says Luke Moroney. Are you a Parramatta supporter?
Me, yeah. Oh, it's a team I supported as a kid. I haven't been. I must admit, I haven't been a diehard Eels fan since I was probably in my late teens. But 1986. There you go, Luke. Luke's from out Paraguay, so I mean he's a Para boy. Yeah, but I'm a fair weather Eels fan, Tom.
Yeah, well, we've got. You might not know this. The Cleary family, coach of the Penrith Panthers, very connected to the real estate industry. His daughter works for a real estate office in Penrith called Property Central.
Okay.
Son-in-law, I believe, still with Ray White, and I think in the Northern Beaches. And there's an office in Penrith called Property Central that's owned by an ex-Penrith player, a Waterhouse. So it's a big week. NRL, AFL's had it. Then we got a straight stretch right through to Christmas time. We've obviously got October, November, Reserve Bank meeting. But I've got to say to you, in real estate, Phil, October, November, December are the months where a lot of income is earned. They're not proportionally, 4 quarters in real estate, they're not all worth equal. Some quarters are worth more. And the one we're moving into is the key quarter. Most real estate income an agent has when they look at their 4 quarters is heavily skewed towards the last calendar quarter of the year. Anyway,
is
Phil
that
Tarrant,
when income is received, or is that where the income is originated, Tom? Like when you actually get the check?
Signed contract. Contract. So there's normally a lag of about 4 to 6 weeks on when you get paid, which is settlements. So this is on signed contracts, or in New South Wales, they call it as exchange contracts. So October, November, December. The main reason is that a lot of people have made their mind that they want to clear the year off and start in a new area. You know, it's a new beginning. Spring homes are looking good. So they're normally on the market in September and October, right? And then summer starts in December. So you get a lot of the residual stock gets sold in December. People don't want to leave their home hanging over the holidays. So a lot of them actually accept offers. It means that it's a good opportunity if you're a buyer to buy in December, because a lot of vendors want to sell.
Bit of an accounting question, Tom, and people might be bored with this, but I'm just curious. Do most real estate agents keep their books on when the contract is exchanged? Is that when they typically recognize the income, or is it when the money actually lands in their bank account and they recognize it? So does it fall into one financial year or the other? I imagine people do different things. How does it normally work?
People do different things, but if you were going to turn around and say what's the main one, it would be when they originate the sale.
Okay.
Because, you know, sometimes you might have settlement contracts that won't settle for 6 months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All righty, Phil, can we leave it at that? Because I've got to get moving to another appointment. Good to see you all.
See you, mate.
We'll see you all next week.